Hey, church, as we begin to look at Romans 7 today, I want you just to ask yourself this question. Am I a good person? As you ask yourself that, you would say, well, I hope so, or I hope people think that about me. But the truth is, none of us are really good. There's nothing good in us. And we're going to see that in Romans 7. But earlier in Romans, we know from chapter 3 that for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. None of us measure up on our own to God's standard. And I want to read this to you as well. This is Psalm chapter 14, verse 3. All have turned away, all have become corrupt. There is no one who does good, not even one. So on our own, we cannot measure up. We stopped right there. That's a kind of a downer thing to say, right? A downer thought to process. But we're actually going to see a very beautiful thing here in Romans 7. And Paul is going to talk about our relationship to the law, and he's going to compare it to a marriage. Now, at this time, just like God designed it, marriage was to be for life. And so if a husband and wife divorced and one of them remarried, then that person would be guilty of adultery. However, if a husband and wife stayed married until one of them died and the person remaining remarried, then they're fine. So basically, again, marriage was until one partner died. Now, Paul uses that analogy to help us understand our relationship with the law. For you see, you and I were both born sinners. We were born married, so to speak, to the law. What is the law? Well, the law is a list of do's and don'ts that people would try to live their life by. And what Paul is saying, since Jesus came and he died, then we died to ourselves and to a new relationship. And so, again, this marriage, a relationship that we have with the law because of Jesus' death and our death to ourselves, now we can come into a new union with Jesus, much like the marriage thing that was happening. One had died, and so there was an opening to a new union. So therefore, we are no longer tied to the law, but now we are in this relationship with Jesus. And almost you could put it just in tied to love, not tied to law, tied to love. And so Paul is telling us that not that we're going to stop all sinning. Matter of fact, he says that there's things that he wishes that he would not do, right? But his flesh still does some of these things. And it's not a get us off the hook kind of thing, like, well, I'm going to keep sinning, so I'll just keep sinning and God will cover that. No, that's not what it is. He's just saying the law is actually there, and the law is not a bad thing. It's actually there to tell us, to help us see in our own selves how we don't measure up to God's standard. So because of the law, we see the things that we fail at. But the important thing to realize about the law and legalism is this. When a person lives in a legalistic type life, they are constantly focused on do's and don'ts, rights and wrongs. And when our minds are constantly focused on these things, then our minds are focused on sin. Because we're thinking constantly, don't do that sin, don't do this sin, you better do this, you better do this. And so sometimes that leads us actually, when it's constant and on our mind, that sin, we may be in fact more apt to do that sin because it's so often on our mind. But Paul is saying because of this relationship with Jesus, now we are covered by Jesus, by his blood, and we need to focus on our lives, on living a life that is connected to him, connected to loving him and loving others. So next time you think about the law, don't think about it like, well, it's not a thing anymore. No, the law it's still there, but it's there to be a guide for us, kind of a checks and balance. Like, hey, I realize I'm kind of failing at this. God, I need your love. I need your covering in this. But stay away from legalism and embrace God's love. Embrace that marriage, that union that we have because of Jesus.